It was a quiet Sunday night in Thailand, May the 26th, 1991, at Bangkok's Don Mueang International Airport. Passengers gathered for an overnight flight to Vienna, Austria. The airline was Lauda Air, a small but ambitious carrier founded by the Formula One racing legend Niki Lauda. The aircraft was a Boeing 767 tragedies, one of the most modern jets of its time. Crewed by experienced Austrian pilots and staffed with a professional cabin crew, the flight looked routine. But just hours later, Lauda Air Flight 004 would become one of the most shocking tragedies in aviation history, an airplane that literally broke apart in midair, its wings tearing away at over 30,000 feet. The crash not only killed all 223 people on board, but also revealed a terrifying flaw in jetliner design, a flaw that would change aviation forever. The flight at 11:02 p.m. Flight 004 took off from Bangkok bound for Vienna with a planned stopover in Bangkok before continuing. The Boeing 767 climbed smoothly into the night sky, with clear weather over Thailand. Captain Thomas J. Velshi, a highly respected 48-year-old American pilot, was in command. Beside him sat First Officer Joseph Thurner, a 41-year-old Austrian with thousands of hours of flying experience. Both men had flown the 767 many times before and trusted its reliability. In the cabin, 213 passengers, most of them Austrian and German tourists returning home from holidays in Asia, settled in for the long-haul flight. The mood was calm, even sleepy. Flight attendant dimmed the lights as passengers reclined in their seats. As the aircraft climbed past 30,000 feet, the cockpit was quiet except for routine checks. But then, something unusual happened. A warning ignored. At 23,000 feet, the cockpit received a warning. Message on the overhead panel, Revision valve. In plain terms, this meant the isolation valve of the thrust reverser system had triggered an alert. Thrust reversers are powerful devices on jet engines used to slow an airplane after landing. They work by redirecting the engine's thrust forward instead of backward. Crucially, they are never supposed to deploy in flight. If a reversey were to suddenly activate while the plane was cruising, the results could be catastrophic. But at that time, Boeing and engine manufacturer Pratt & Whitney insisted that an in-flight deployment was virtually impossible. The 767's design had multiple safeguards to prevent it, and because the warning lights often gave false indications, pilots were trained to consider them nuisance messages. Captain Velk saw the alert, noted it, and continued the climb. At 30,000 feet, the warning disappeared. He made a calm radio call to air traffic control, reporting everything normal, but it was not normal. Inside the left engine, a hidden fault was waiting to unleash disaster, the catastrophe. At 11:17 p.m., just 15 minutes after takeoff, Lauda Air Flight 004 reached 31,000 feet. Then it happened. With no warning, the left engine's thrust reverser suddenly deployed in full flight power at cruising altitude. The effect was instantaneous and devastating. The left engine, instead of pushing the airplane forward, was now violently forcing it backward. The jet yawed sharply left, rolled, and the pilots lost control almost immediately. Warning alarms shrieked as the cockpit went from calm to chaos in a split second. Within seconds, the aerodynamic forces overwhelmed the aircraft's structure. At speeds over 500 miles per hour, the left wing tore away from the fuselage. The right wing soon followed, the tail separated. In less than 1 minute, the Boeing 767 broke apart completely in the skies over Thailand. The fuselage plunged toward the ground, ripping through the night sky before smashing into the mountainous jungle of Phu Toi National Park. The impact created a massive explosion, scattering debris across miles of forest. All 223 people on board were killed instantly. It remains the deadliest aviation accident in Thailand's history and one of the most violent structural failures ever recorded in Thailand commercial aviation. Aftermath at the crash site. Rescuers arriving at the remote crash site were met with devastation. The jungle was littered with wreckage, sections of fuselage, torn wings, seats, and personal belongings of passengers. The violence of the breakup left little intact. Entire engines were buried in craters. The smell of burning jet fuel lingered for days. Identification of victims was grueling. Families waited in anguish for news, but the sheer destruction meant that recovery took weeks. For Austria and Germany, the loss was deeply felt, as dozens of families lost loved ones in what was supposed to be a routine holiday flight home. For Niki Lauda, the airline's founder and a world-famous Formula One champion, the news was devastating. Lauda himself immediately traveled to the crash site in Thailand, insisting on town being present to face grieving families and to demand answers from Boeing and the authorities. The investigation. The Thai authorities, with help from American and Austrian investigators, launched a full-scale inquiry. At first, the cause of the crash was a mystery. The wreckage was in small fragments and the jungle terrain made recovery difficult, but as investigators pieced together evidence, the truth emerged. The cockpit voice recorder captured the pilot's last moments. The warning light for the thrust reverser had indeed appeared minutes before the accident, but because Boeing documentation downplayed its seriousness, the pilots had not been required to land immediately. The flight data recorder confirmed the nightmare. The left engine, S reverser, had deployed at 31,000 feet. In milliseconds, the aerodynamic forces became uncontrollable. The breakup sequence matched what witnesses on the ground had reported: a fireball in the sky followed by debris raining down. The conclusion was undeniable. A thrust reverser malfunction had doomed the airplane. Boeing's crisis. For Boeing, the implications were staggering. The 767 had been hailed as a state of the art aircraft, but now its safety was under scrutiny. Boeing engineers had insisted for years that in-flight reverser deployment was impossible. Lauda Air Flight 004 proved otherwise. Niki Lauda himself refused to stay silent. Known for his blunt personality, he publicly confronted Boeing executives. In press conferences, he accused the company of negligence, demanding to know why such a critical system could fail without backup protection. He even threatened to personally fly a 767 if Boeing wanted to prove its safety, telling reporters, if Boeing says it is safe, then let them put me in a 767 and deploy the reverser at altitude. I will fly it myself. The world watched as an airline founder who had survived fiery crashes as a race car driver now became the leading voice of accountability in aviation. Safety reforms. The investigation forced sweeping changes. Boeing redesigned the thrust reverser system for all 767s and other models. New safeguards ensured that reversers could not deploy unless the aircraft was firmly on the ground. Airlines were ordered to immediately inspect their fleets, replacing faulty components. Pilots were retrained to treat thrust reverser warnings as serious emergencies, requiring diversion and immediate landing. Regulators worldwide tightened oversight of thrust reverser systems. Though the reforms came too late for the 223 victims of Flight 004, they ensured that such an accident would never happen again. The legacy. Lauda Air Flight 004 remains one of the most tragic yet pivotal accidents in aviation history. It demonstrated that even advanced aircraft could harbor fatal design flaws. It showed that warning messages, however small, must never be ignored. And it highlighted the importance of relentless voices like Niki Lauda, who refused to let victims be forgotten. For the families who lost loved ones, the pain never fully healed. Memorials were built in Austria and Thailand, honoring those who perished. Pilgrimages to the crash site continue, where locals still remember the fiery night when the sky fell silent. For the aviation industry, Flight 004 became a turning point. The changes it brought made flying safer for millions who would never even know the name Lauda Air. Each safe landing of a Boeing 767 after 1991 is, in a sense, part of the legacy of those who died. Closing reflection, more than 3 decades later, Lauda Air Flight 004 remains one of the most haunting tragedies in aviation history. For investigators, it is a case study in catastrophic failure. For families, it is a wound that never fully healed. For the aviation community, it is a turning point that forever reshapes safety standards. On the night of May the 26th, 1991, passengers boarded the Boeing 767 in Bangkok with little sense of what lay ahead. Some were tourists heading home, others were business travelers, and among them were families looking forward to reuniting with loved ones in Vienna. The plane, one of the most to-plate modern airliners of its time, symbolized reliability. No one could have imagined that within hours it would become the centerpiece of one of Jataca's nights. At 31,000 feet, disaster struck with terrifying suddenness. The left engine's thrust reverser, a system designed to slow the plane after landing, deployed in mid-flight, an event considered nearly impossible. The forces were instant and catastrophic. The 767 rolled, shuddered, and broke apart in the sky over Thailand. Investigators would later describe the breakup as one of the most violent ever recorded in commercial aviation. There was no chance for survival. The story of Lauda Air 004 is not only about tragedy, it is also about resilience and progress. Every accident, as devastating as it may be, leaves behind a legacy of lessons. The crash exposed vulnerabilities in thrust reverser systems, prompting urgent redesigns and stricter certification processes. Airlines adopted new maintenance checks, regulators strengthened oversight, and manufacturers built in safeguards to ensure such a failure could never recur. It was a brutal reminder that aviation safety is written in the blood of past mistakes, but it is also strengthened by the determination never to repeat them. For the families of the 223 lives lost, the technical fixes offered little comfort. They had to grapple with the sudden loss of fathers, mothers, children, and friends. For them, May the 26th was not an entry in a safety report, it was the day their world collapsed. Yet even in grief, many of them supported investigations and safety reforms, channeling their sorrow into a mission to protect others. Their loved ones' deaths, though tragic, became part of the foundation of safer skies for future generations. Looking back, Flight 004 serves as a stark reminder that no technology, however advanced, is immune to failure. The Boeing 767 was one of the most trusted airliners of its time, yet one flaw proved fatal. Aviation continues to learn from such events, proving that vigilance must never waver and that progress is born from questioning, testing, and improving the systems we rely on. When we remember the night sky over Thailand in May 1991, we remember not just the horror of a jet tearing apart mid-air, but the determination that followed. We remember that those passengers did not die in vain. Their story lives on every time a plane lands safely, every time a system is checked twice, and every time aviation chooses caution over complacency. The legacy of Lauda Air Flight 004 is more than tragedy, it is resilience. It is the vow that no airplane will ever again fall victim to the same flaw, and that every life lost will forever remind us of aviation's most sacred duty: to keep the skies safe.